Hey everyone, thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, but more specifically, we're going to be discussing the Bitcoin dominance. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and check out Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. One of the things that we've said throughout this year is that the Bitcoin dominance will likely rise throughout the entire year. Now, again, this has not been a popular view, but it is now starting to be embraced by a lot of people, which is funny because oftentimes the rally by Bitcoin dominance can sort of top out by the end of the year, okay? But some of the things that we've said this year, right? We've said that Bitcoin dominance will go up, that Ether Bitcoin will drop. Alts will, of course, bleed back to Bitcoin. I mean, they're basically all the same theory to some degree, and I've said that if you want exposure to the cryptoverse, Bitcoin is where you likely want to be because it gives you exposure to the upside while minimizing your downside risk, right? So you get that exposure while minimizing your downside risk. I've said many times that a DCA strategy for Bitcoin is in my view the best approach based on some metric, whether it's a risk metric or something else. We put out a video back in January talking about that idea, and we've done it throughout the years as well. But in this video, I want to talk here about the Bitcoin dominance. Obviously, Bitcoin has taken out the prior yearly high, as we mentioned yesterday. And just for reference, to see it go this much higher than the yearly high is a pretty impressive move. I know coming into the year, I said that Bitcoin could go to would likely be between 12 to 35K this year. But after this move in the summer, I was sort of expecting that 35K was off the cards. But nevertheless, Bitcoin has made it there, and the dominance has continued to go up, right? So in that sense, a lot of these macro theories continue to play out, right? I mean, of course, the nuances of every single move are very difficult to predict. But what have we seen? We've seen the Bitcoin dominance trend higher all year. We've seen Ether Bitcoin basically collapse all year. And I know some people don't like it when I use that word collapse, but what do you call this, right? I mean, this has just been, it was slowly dropping. And then we said that once it breaks 0.058, then the losses by Ethereum against Bitcoin could actually accelerate. And you can see that right after the Ether Bitcoin pair lost 0.058, it's really started to accelerate here to the downside. The first week after losing 0.058, Ethereum dropped about 2%. The next week it dropped 3%. This week it's dropped 5%. So you can see that these losses by Ethereum continue to add up, especially on its Bitcoin pair. And so this macro theory continues to play out, right? Just like the Bitcoin dominance theory continues to play out. So sort of the speculation, as we said before, is that a lot of what we're witnessing is the conversion of altcoins to Bitcoin, right? We're watching the conversion of altcoins to Bitcoin. And that is why the Bitcoin dominance goes higher, no matter the direction of Bitcoin USD. If you think about it, if you look at Bitcoin dominance, you can see that it's now up 10 weeks in a row. Actually, on about the first or second week, I think we said it's likely going to follow something similar to what the dollar did and print 10, 11. Well, we didn't know at the time that it was going to be 10 or 11 green weeks in a row for the dollar, but we said it could follow something similar, and the dollar did 11 green weeks in a row. Bitcoin dominance is now in its 10th green week in a row. But what's interesting is that while dominance has gone up 10 weeks in a row, Bitcoin USD has not. I mean, obviously Bitcoin USD has gone up a lot over the last 10 weeks, but you can see that only about 4 of them were in fact green. So 4 were green, 6 were red. Bitcoin dominance went up for every single one of those weeks. And now we find ourselves at 54% dominance. I believe the last video that I did on the dominance, we were about 51 to 52%. Now we've gone up another 2% in a relatively short period of time. One of the things we mentioned that with the dominance is that once it breaks out, right, from these levels over here, we could back test it, and if it does, we'll likely hold it as support. It also corresponded to holding the bull market support band as support, and ever since there, it has been exploding to the upside. And again, my target for the Bitcoin dominance that I've had for the last couple of years is in fact around that 60% level. Okay, now it doesn't mean that it has to go all the way there. And if it does, it doesn't mean that it's going to go all the way there in this move, right? We could go up to like 55, 56% and then spend 2 months consolidating. We could also top out here at 54% and then spend another month or two consolidating. You can see that we've had plenty of moves up and then consolidation. And what's interesting is that, I mean, it's been a pretty clear trend. I mean, it's been just a series of higher lows and higher highs. And again, what a lot of people ask me is, well, why do you focus so much on the dominance instead of Bitcoin USD? And I've tried to explain it as best I can. I think either you buy the theory or you don't. Okay, you either think it's important or you don't. And some people are just only ever going to be concerned about the USD valuations of their portfolio, right? They're only going to care about what their altcoin is doing against the US dollar. They're never going to compare. They're never going to care about the Bitcoin valuation. There's nothing I can say that's going to make them care. But I will remind you, the main reason we talk about Bitcoin dominance is to figure out what sector of the market is worth the risk if you want to put your money into the market. And so if we're bullish on the Bitcoin dominance, which, by the way, remember, Bitcoin is the lowest risk asset in the Cryptoverse if you buy that theory. But even based on like market cap, it's been around the longest. It's held the #1 spot for the entire time. But if you buy that theory or that thesis that Bitcoin is the least risky asset in the Cryptoverse, it's also subject to less regulation than the rest of the market. And you also think that the dominance of that cryptocurrency that you think is the least risky is also going to go higher, then the argument is that altcoins are not really worth the risk with respect to Bitcoin, at least collectively. That doesn't mean that some altcoins cannot perform. I think every time I put out this video, I get a few people that say, well, what about this altcoin? You're not considering this one? Yes, there's always a few that outperform. But if the collective altcoin market were outperforming Bitcoin, then the dominance of Bitcoin would not be going higher. The Bitcoin dominance continues to go higher because the altcoin market continues to underperform Bitcoin. It doesn't mean that Bitcoin can't go down. And that's one of the arguments, is that at some point, right, it does go down and the altcoin market still bleeds against it. But at this point, of course, that has not yet happened. I mean, we've seen some bleeds by Bitcoin where the dominance went up, but the price of Bitcoin has continued to push higher. Okay. So, in a sense, a lot of these theories are playing out. It's just a painstakingly slow process, right? The Ethereum Bitcoin valuation has continued to collapse. You know, and again, I can't tell you how many people I've gotten into arguments with about this. I just kept saying, well, like, this is just a high, a lower high, a lower high, a lower high, a lower high, and so on and so forth. And it's also a low, a lower low, etc. And now we're just continuing to go into that capitulation phase. I'm not saying it can't bounce at some point around these levels, but my expectation is that the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation continues to drop. Remember, Bitcoin rallies serve a purpose. They break altcoins off of their Bitcoin support levels. Perhaps this is the last support level that needs to be broken. Okay, the going below 0.049 for the Ether Bitcoin pair. So, in that sense, right, you know, in the pre-halving year, and we said this, by the way, at the beginning of the year, right? In the pre-halving year, no matter the direction of Bitcoin USD, the Bitcoin dominance should go up. Therefore, if you want exposure to the Cryptoverse, it tends to be a good idea to be mostly exposed to Bitcoin because it gives you the upside potential while minimizing your downside risk. And you might say, well, what if my altcoin goes up 10% or something? Or what if this altcoin that I want to buy goes up 10, 20%? The argument is that while it might happen that altcoin could go up 10 or 20%, it only does that if Bitcoin went up at first, right? It's like if Bitcoin makes a move, then yes, the altcoin market can be dragged up kicking and screaming, but it was only because Bitcoin made the move first, right? Not because the altcoin market was leading the way, it's because Bitcoin led the way. And you can see that with the dominance now at 54%, that thesis continues to be valid, right? Break out of the prior accumulation zone, back test it. And if you guys remember, we put out a video on this date when it was back testing it. I believe it was, right around here. And we said, I don't think it spent 2 years trying to break out of this range just to fall back in. And you can see that we held it, and now we've continued to see the dominance explode to the upside. The bull market support band for dominance, which is what previously held, now ranges from 50.14% to 50.48%. So Bitcoin dominance is well above its bull market support band. One of the things that we've also mentioned is that if you go look at dominance, excluding stablecoins, it's actually now at over 59%, right? It's at 59.25%. And I've had a lot of people say, well, the Bitcoin dominance uptrend only started in 2022 because it put in a new low here in September of 2022 when we had the merge rally by Ethereum. But the counter argument to that is that no, the Bitcoin dominance has been going up since May of 2021. This metric includes stablecoins, which if you're going to use the dominance to better understand the altcoin market, then the stablecoin market cap is not as relevant. I'm not saying it doesn't have some relevance. I like using the Bitcoin dominance, including stablecoins, a lot, and I talk about it a lot. I think there's also value in looking at it excluding stablecoins as well. And when you look at it excluding stablecoins, what you'll notice is that's been putting in higher lows since May of 2021. And every step of the way, it seems like a lot of people have faded this idea. I think a lot of people are now starting to come around to it. But for a long time, this was faded. Like this view was faded, that the dominance would go higher. And when Ethereum had the merge rally, even though the dominance went lower, including stablecoins, the only reason that really happened was because the stablecoin market cap was still, was still at fairly elevated levels, right? I mean, even in May of 2022, the stablecoin market cap was elevated. And you can see that the stablecoin market cap in May of 2021 was all the way down here at like 82 billion. And then in September of 2022, the stablecoin market cap was at like 144 billion. So that was the reason why the dominance of Bitcoin was so much lower by that point, rather than being at these levels, is because there's a lot more stable coins in the market. But if you exclude the stablecoin market, if you exclude it, what you'll see is that Bitcoin dominance has continued to trend higher, and it just keeps on putting in higher highs and higher lows, right? So this is the chart that has kept me risk averse out of the altcoin market. I've said, if you want exposure to crypto, Bitcoin is where you want to be, because the dominance of Bitcoin will likely continue to trend higher. That doesn't mean that Bitcoin is immune to drops. I mean, we are getting pretty high in terms of just the short-term move that Bitcoin has had. But what it does mean is that it minimizes your downside in the altcoin market. By the way, if you don't necessarily believe that this is just simply a continuation of a rotation of capital, I can kind of understand your view, because Bitcoin is now at a new yearly high. It is, like, that's a true statement. But a counterpoint, and this could change, right? I'm not going to sit here and say that it can't. We obviously know that the markets are incredibly volatile, and at this point, a lot of changes are happening to the cryptoverse in a relatively short period of time. I mean, the market went up. Bitcoin went up 14.5% in this week alone, right? So this thing can change very quickly. But at least in the short term, total market cap is at the same, more or less, valuation that it was back in July, and it's at the same valuation, more or less, than it was back in April. So at this point, I think a lot of these rallies that we've seen are a lot of people converting their alts to Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin, going on a run, people FOMOing in. And so far, it just keeps leading total market cap up to the same valuation. If you were to overlay Bitcoin USD onto this chart, you'll see that at each top by total market cap, Bitcoin USD has been at a higher level. And that's why the Bitcoin dominance continues to go higher. While Bitcoin has gone higher, total market cap has wicked higher, right? This wick is higher, but it hasn't yet proven to be a breakout of this prior range. Total 2 so far has been a series of lower highs, right? So while total market cap has sort of hit that same level in April, July, and October, total 2, which excludes Bitcoin, has been putting in lower highs, and total 3, which excludes both Bitcoin and Ethereum, has been putting in lower highs in both April, July, and potentially October, although, the month is not over yet, and we don't know exactly how far this will take us up. But I think the issue is if Bitcoin does roll over at some point in the next week or two, and total 3 is unable to take out this high, and if total 2 is unable to take out this high, then is there not a risk of it just sort of coming back down to this, to the lower part of the range if Bitcoin were to pull back? Bitcoin's had a massive rally. The altcoin market has not really seen that same type of rally, okay? And another way to visualize this, rather than looking specifically at the dominance, is to look at the altcoin market, total 3, minus USDT divided by Bitcoin, right? And if you look at that chart, this is what you get. And I've said many times that the altcoin market is likely going to roll over and bleed against Bitcoin. And you can see that we got this bounce just like we got prior times, right? We said we might get a bounce by the altcoin market against Bitcoin from this level. We did. It got rejected off the bull market support band, just like it got rejected over here. And now it is now back down to 40%. Remember, this metric tends to top out at parity with Bitcoin at 1, and it's bottomed out over here at around 25%. Now, if that is the case, it means that the altcoin market still has another 37 to 38% drop against Bitcoin. This has not been a popular view, right? But if you go back and watch all these videos on this metric, you'll see that, in a prior video, it was at like 48%. Before that, it was even higher. And it always sounds bad, right? But, you fast forward and it's like, instead of the altcoin market needing to drop 48%, which is what it was back in August against Bitcoin, now it's more of a 37% drop, okay? And I think what's happening is a lot of people are potentially being blindsided by this because they're only looking at altcoins on their USD pairs. They're saying, well, my altcoin is holding up okay, right? It's doing okay on its USD pair. But what they're not necessarily recognizing is that it's getting completely destroyed on its Bitcoin pair. Take ADA Bitcoin, for example. It is broken this support level, which is what happens in Bitcoin rallies. And then the question is what happens if Bitcoin rolls over? ADA Bitcoin has nowhere to hide. Same thing, BNB Bitcoin, right? I mean, this is a new low going all the way back to April of 2021. Not a new macro low, but it's lower than it has been since April of 2021, which is when the Bitcoin dominance made this drop, was April of 2021. Dot Bitcoin put in new lows this week, right? A lot of altcoins have put in new lows this week. AVAX Bitcoin has put in new lows this week. Okay, a lot of them have. Some of them have not, right? But a lot of them have. And, Cardano is one. Avalanche is one. I'm not really sure if I think Maker Bitcoin, yeah, this one's had a bit of a pump off of this low here. So this is not an example. Theta Bitcoin, it's gone lower. Uni Bitcoin, it's going lower, right? It took out this May low. It took out the June low. A lot of these altcoins just keep going lower on their Bitcoin pairs. But every step of the way, people just keep saying they're holding up well. But I don't necessarily see it that way. I see that they're up on their USD pairs, at least temporarily, because Bitcoin is up. But what happens, right? We've said all year long, if Bitcoin goes up, dominance goes up. If Bitcoin goes down, dominance goes up because there's less liquidity in the altcoin market, right? So the whole argument is it doesn't matter the direction of Bitcoin USD. The dominance of Bitcoin is likely going to go up no matter what. One thing that I think that caught a lot of people off guard with the Bitcoin dominance is that if you were to look at where it topped out last cycle, it topped out in September. So there's a lot of people that were very vocal that, when it was back over here in September, they said that we were going to go below these range highs because that's where it topped out last cycle, okay? But I think the main difference why that has not been the case is because if you were to look at monetary policy, you can see that interest rates were already starting to drop by the time Bitcoin dominance topped out, okay? This time, Bitcoin dominance interest rates have not started to drop yet. So as long as we're heading into tighter and tighter monetary policy, it's not just high. You don't just have to see a higher interest rate for it to be tighter monetary policy. Just holding them at sufficiently restrictive levels is tighter monetary policy, reducing the size of their balance sheet. As long as this continues to be the main thing, the dominance of Bitcoin, I think, can still go up, right? And I mean, again, it did not top out last cycle until we started to get rate cuts. And we haven't even seen a rate cut yet, and we're likely not going to see a rate cut until the S&P sees some type of a significant sell-off. So the altcoin market has been bleeding back to Bitcoin basically for the entire year. Total 2 continues to put in lower highs. Total 3 continues to put in lower highs. Total market cap, of course, has not. It's been reaching sort of the same level every single time, but that's because it includes Bitcoin, which is the main reason the asset class exists in the first place. So dominance continues to go up. Another way that we've measured this before is to look at the year-to-date ROI of Bitcoin dominance, right? We talked about that a lot without stablecoins. And if you take a look at this metric and you compare 2023 to the, I mean, you can see where it is right now. Like it's at it's at what, 1.23. If you look at the average of the last two halving year or pre-halving years, you get this chart, right? So you can see that this is still following the general average, right? And we said we're likely going to see the Bitcoin dominance close this gap before the end of the year. And have we not done that, right? We've done that. I still think it will trend higher into the end of the year. Maybe seeing it go up to 1.2x, 1.26x off the yearly open, or 26% off the yearly open, or 1.25x. So I still think there's a little bit more room for the dominance to go up this year. But I also don't necessarily think that it's going to top out until we go back to looser monetary policy. So just be cognizant of that idea that last cycle dominance did not even top out until that happened. Now, one of the reasons why I think that I underestimated the amount of liquidity in the market is just because I perhaps I should have looked closer at these metrics like total 3 minus USDT divided by Bitcoin, and recognizing that last cycle, Bitcoin did not find its yearly high until total 3 fell below 40% or so, right around that 40% level. I think it was during the week that it was between 36 to 41% where Bitcoin found those yearly highs. So I think there's just been a lot more liquidity in the market than I was expecting. But it doesn't necessarily change the macro trends, and it doesn't necessarily change the macro views. The macro views, again, being Ether Bitcoin bleeds this year. The macro view being alt Bitcoin pairs bleed. Bitcoin dominance goes up. If you want exposure to crypto, Bitcoin's where you want to be. Not that it can't go down. It's just that it does go down. The altcoin market will likely bleed even worse. So hopefully these videos on Bitcoin dominance have been useful to you guys. Not everyone appreciates them, but one way that I sometimes reach a few people is by showing this chart over here. And that is to take the inverse of the ADA Bitcoin or Ether Bitcoin or dot Bitcoin, just the inverse of alt Bitcoin pairs. So you're looking at Bitcoin alt pairs, right? So if you're looking at ADA Bitcoin and you were to take the inverse of it, so you're looking at now the Bitcoin ADA valuation, look at this trend. I mean, like in 2021, one Bitcoin would have fetched you around 15, 16,000 ADA. Now one Bitcoin fetches you 120,000 ADA. Okay? Ethereum, right? Look at the inverse of that. So you're looking at the Bitcoin, you're looking at the Bitcoin Ether pair. Look at this trend, right? I mean, back in the merge, one Bitcoin fetched you less than 12 ETH. Now it gets you 19 ETH, right? It's been a huge move, a huge change. So, it certainly is possible. And we, going back to sort of this year-to-date ROI chart for the Bitcoin dominance, yeah, it's possible that we're going to reach some type of topping process over the next couple of months, at least short term. But what we've also seen is that while it does tend to, top out at certain times, what we continue to see is that it continues to go up given enough time, right? All these moves have just been, you get a move up and then you consolidate, and then you move up and consolidate, move up, consolidate, and then again, move up. The reason we focus on this is because we want to know as investors when altcoins become worth the risk against Bitcoin. And last cycle, I don't think they became worth the risk against Bitcoin until they were down here at around 25% of Bitcoin's market cap. Now, a lot of altcoins did not bottom out on their USD pairs, even at 25% of Bitcoin's market cap, but they did start to collectively bottom out against Bitcoin. So that when Bitcoin actually entered into a period of quantitative easing, those altcoins were able to start doing very well, not only on their USD pairs, but also on their Bitcoin pairs. So that is why we focus on this. I know not everyone believes in the dominance topic as something that's important, but throughout this year, the Bitcoin dominance has kept me generally away from the altcoin market. Not interested in it. If you want exposure to crypto, Bitcoin's where you want to be. It's made me believe that the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation is collapsing, that alt Bitcoin pairs are collapsing. On any given day, like today, you can look at some altcoins and see they are up slightly. But what have the trends been, right? The trends continue to be that they continue to just collapse, right? Alt Bitcoin pairs collapse, Ether Bitcoin collapses. By the way, a lot of people keep telling me that Ether is holding up well on its Bitcoin pair. And again, a lot of that is just sort of subjective. But at what point does that narrative no longer hold is the question. It's down 15% this month alone, right? So if it was holding up well over here at 0.075, and if it was holding up well according to the masses at 0.065, is it still holding up well? And what happens if it goes below this level? Is it still holding up well if that happens? So I think the question is at what point do we say, all right, like this is a collapse of the Ether Bitcoin valuation and it's no longer holding up well. So just keep an eye on the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation because it does tend to be something that because the market cap of Ethereum is so high relative to the altcoin market, when it drops, it can be a major tailwind for the Bitcoin dominance. And again, that's one of the reasons why dominance is up so much, is because the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation has dropped 15% this month alone. And the month isn't even over yet, right? But it's dropped 15% this month alone. So we will continue to follow the Bitcoin dominance. I do hope you guys enjoy these videos. I do know that the Bitcoin USD put in a new yearly high at around $35,000. While again, that was my general view going into the year, I cannot claim that anymore because I sort of relinquished that view after the summer came to pass. So I think I underestimated the amount of liquidity in the market that was coming out of the altcoins and going into Bitcoin. That did lead to new yearly highs for Bitcoin. The overall macro trends that we've been discussing still, of course, remain the same. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and again, check out Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. I'll see you guys again. Bye.